All right. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode. This one is gonna be quite tricky. I feel like I said that multiple times now, but yeah, this one's actually a bit harder to understand. It is not hard to do. You can just copy the stuff as usual. Description down below, all that kind of good stuff. But it is a bit hard to understand, as today we are going to be installing something that is called a reverse proxy. A reverse proxy sits in between your server and the client, and it kind of grabs all the requests that you make towards the server, and it is going to redistribute it in some sort of fashion depending on how you configure it. It could do load balancing, it could generate your SSL certificate. It does a lot of things, and we're going to be using it for the SSL certificate in our case. Yeah, so we can have HTTPS, and also we could have a web secure socket for a game. So it is also going to be useful later on if we want to do some more advanced stuff, but nothing for chapter 2. I invite you, as always, to log in your instance if it's not done already. Of course, SSH, deploy, and then the name of your domain. Once you're on here, I'm going to invite you to actually go to the root folder. We haven't really visited this one just yet, but when you're inside of deploy, you can do cd ... and do it again. Yeah, cd ... So we enter like the root folder, and I'm not talking about this folder here. I'm talking about the base of the Linux folder, which is where you're going to see all of these nice little folder here. So in here, this is where we're going to be creating our traefik folder. The reverse proxy is called traefik. Slight thing here. It's not written traefik as in the traffic jam. It's called traefik. So just bear that in mind, as we are going to write it quite often today. So just be accustomed to making a mistake in that spelling. We're going to begin right now. So at the root folder, I want us to create a traefik folder. So we're going to do a make dir, mkdir, and then we do the dash traefik like this, traefik. Permission denied, because of course I did not do sudo in front of it. So sudo make dir traefik. What is my password? This is my password. We can then do a ls to find out that the traefik folder is here. I will cd inside of it, clear, and we can tell we are at the right place by doing a print working directory. And inside of here, we're going to establish a configuration file. Now, we're going to be using Nano. I know some of you like Vim. I personally like Nano. Actually, I don't like any of them, but I'm more accustomed to Nano. Nano is a text editor that you have by default inside of Ubuntu. So we are going to create a file. So I invite you to do a sudo nano, and then it's the name of the file, if I can write. The file name is going to be traefik.yml. That is going to be the config file. Now ensure that you are in the right folder. If you are not in the right folder, you can always specify the default path. So you could say traefik-traefik.yml. That's where the file is going to be. Hit enter, and then one thing I want to make sure that you do, ensure that you're doing this as sudo, right? So write sudo in front of it, because if you do your modification, you're done writing the file, and you want to save, you're not going to be able to save if you are not a super user. So of course, ensure you are under sudo. Once we're inside of here, I will copy, yes, I will copy everything. So you guys can do the same. It's going to be in the description down below. So I have everything under my clipboard. When you go back in Nano, ensure that you're not click and dragging your cursor. If you do, it's going to copy. So just do a one tap click, then you can right click and paste. And it's going to lay down a couple of things over here. Yeah, I might switch a couple of things here. In your version, it should be fine, but this one I'm going to be calling it server. Yeah. So traefik, as we said, is a reverse proxy. It's going to grab, it's going to be sitting in front of the client and the server, and we need to give him some configuration to allow people to connect to us. Here, we have entry points. So which port are going to be open on traefik? So which port is traefik going to be listening to? He's going to be listening to 80. That is the standard HTTP protocol. So if somebody types in HTTP escape game XYZ, it's going to go through this entry point that we define as web. Web secure is basically HTTPS. So it's going to go through the web secure entry point, and finally server is going to go on 5000. This is in case you have an API or you have something else that you're opening on a different port. This is why I use it. Now, something I haven't mentioned is that Traefik actually is going to run within a Docker container. That's why we installed Docker first. So Traefik can run within a Docker container, and this way it needs to know a couple of things about Docker. So it needs to live on a Docker network. The way we do this is by saying provider Docker network, and then I called my network Traefik network. So ensure you remember this name here. It's going to be quite important we have it. Followed by API, insecure, and dashboard. These configs are just there so we can see something visually out of Traefik. Technically, you would not need to have that out there. But for us, as we're developing this, remove that before production. I would say, yeah, go ahead and include it in this case. And finally, one of the most important things here, and why one of the reasons we're using Traefik, is by having a certificate resolver. So something that is going to create a SSL certificate so we can use the web secure over here. So we can have HTTPS basically. So for the certificate resolver, we specify a challenge called myHTTP challenge. It is a ACME challenge, which stands for Automated Certificate Management Environment, I think. Basically, just remember the first two, automated certificate. So we don't have to take care of it. It's doing it on its own. We need to specify email. So here, of course, don't write mine. I'd be really happy if you don't write mine, just write yours. It's going to let you know if something expired or if something is wrong or if you've reached the limit, which can happen. If you misconfigure things and you're spawning your server back and back again, you might break the automated certificate for a while. So ensure that everything is fine. Put your email on there and you'll be notified if something is wrong. And finally, storage is where we're going to store that challenge, that ACME challenge. And the HTTP challenge is going to enter through web, so through port 80, through HTTP. Okay, and finally I have one last line over here that is log level debug. Might be useful, but it's really annoying if you're trying to read what's going on because it says a lot of different things. Up to you, I will leave it for now, and it's something that we should remove before production. Okay, so our file is completely written there. This is how we save it. And I just want to say that because if you look at the bottom there, these hat sign are basically control. So we want to do a write out and then exit. So to do that, Control O, file name to enter, yes. So we're going to hit enter and then Control X. This way, everything should be saved. If you do a cat, so CAT, and you look at the traefik.yml, you can see the same thing as we just saw in Nano. This should be there, this should be working, and now we have a config file living right here under our Traefik folder. A config file is fun, but that's not the application. Like, we don't have Traefik on our machine, we just created a random file somewhere and says, hey, these are the Traefik configuration. To install Traefik, we're actually going to use docker-compose. So we're actually going to use Docker to use the image Traefik have created themselves and run that in our container, in a Docker container. So basically, we're never really going to have Traefik on our machine. It is going to be inside of a container that Traefik themselves provide to us. So this is how we do it. We're going to start by doing a sudo nano again. So we're creating a new file called docker-compose.yml, and it's very important you write it exactly this way. So docker-compose.yml, and as you probably notice, it's another configuration file. So we are configuring this thing. We're configuring Docker Compose to pick up the right image, run it. That's pretty much it, yeah. Once again, I'll be asking you to copy this from the description down below, or you could just write it out if you wish. All right, so we start by defining a version. We're on version 3.8. I think we're a bit back in time, but it's a version that works great. So I'm using 3.8. And then we're defining a service object. And you're gonna realize that there's some indentation over here. It means that everything on this level over here is gonna be a different service. In this language here, a service would be a different container. Now, throughout the tutorial, we're always going to be using one Docker file for one service, but if you see it in different ways in other tutorial, for example, you can tell that one service is equal to one Docker container. Let's have a look. Inside of this service that we call reverse proxy, we have a container name that I call traefik reverse proxy. We're using this image, so traefik v2.4. This is how it actually knows what to run inside of it. And we're opening some ports. We're opening port 80, that is for the HTTP protocol. 443 is for the HTTPS protocol, but also the web secure socket. 8080 is actually just for the traefik dashboard. Eventually we'll want to get rid of this one, but we're leaving it here so we can actually see what goes on in traefik through the dashboard. And finally 5000 would be for the server. So let's leave that here. Now this next one is actually quite cool. It's called volumes, and volume basically means we can copy things from the main server, so the one we're currently in right now, to the container. So inside of the VM that is going to be running traefik or any other Docker application. Docker container, sorry. So here we say, grab the Docker socket running on my main machine and you can have it as well. This way, traefik is going to be able to read what goes on with Docker on our main machine. And this is how it's actually going to distribute the load and read what's going on. And you'll see that a bit later on as we create traefik labels inside other Docker Compose file. This one, just know that, so TLDR, traefik knows about Docker. Cool. Second line here, we copy the config that we just created. Fair enough. And finally, we also copy the Let's Encrypt folder so it can use the SSL certificate generated to add it to our traefik. Finally, we specify which network it's going to live on, and it's going to live on the traefik network. For it to be defined in this file, we kind of have to go down here and also specify that this network is going to be external, meaning that we are the one that's going to be creating it with Docker. Something we haven't done, by the way, which we'll get to just after this. So everything looks good. Control O, enter, Control X. Let's look at it. Looking good. All right, now there are two things left to do. One of them would be to run this container we just created, and the second one would be to create a Docker network. I'm gonna do the first one first, though it's not the right order, but I'll do it so you guys can see what goes on if you are running into an error with traefik, or Docker in this case. I'm going to do a sudo docker-compose, and that's the name of our file that we put under bin earlier. So we can just do sudo docker-compose, and we're gonna say up. And it should try to create the reverse proxy, so it pulled the image from the traefik, and it try running the application. But you're gonna see that there is an error response over here. It says the traefik network was not found. And that's true because we haven't created it just yet. So to create this, new line, sudo docker network create, and then the name of our network. Once this is completed, you should see a hash. You don't really need to remember this because we're going to be referencing it through name, so through traefik network. Let's hit the up arrow twice so we can go back to sudo docker-compose up, hit enter, and it seemed like it worked. Now it doesn't seem like it worked because we get a bunch of spam, but that's just because our log level is on debug, so we get to see a lot of things. Now one cool thing that just happened by doing this is that we finally get to see a visual out of our Linux machine. So if we go on the web, we go on a new browser, we type in escape game or the name of your domain .xyz, and then we check for the port 8080. This should put us on the traefik dashboard. So it sees, if traefik is running behind us, it sees what entry point we can use. So server, traefik, web, and web secure. Those were all entry point that we've defined. At the exception of traefik, we didn't really define this one, but it found its way through there because that's traefik dashboard. And right now there ain't really anything interesting we can look at here. We can see what goes on a bit, but nothing really helpful to us at the moment. However, we have something showing on our Linux machine out there. So congratulations for making it this far. We now have something we can see. So one thing to do before we go to the checklist is I want you to notice that we have this running right now, and of course the traffic, it works. But if we go back and we decide to hit Control and C and just cancel this operation, you're gonna see that the reverse proxy actually stopped. So if we go back, we hit refresh, it is no longer going to work. And that's because our Docker container that we ran, we did a docker compose up, it stays in up state until we tell it to not be in the up state. So basically what we can do is we can run it, but we can run it detached from this command prompt. So we can say -d. And now this way it doesn't lock up our command prompt and the container is running. In the next episode, we're going to see how to restart this container in case something goes wrong. But at the moment, let's just leave it as is. And if I was to refresh, I can see it again. So that is pretty much it, actually. For the checklist, it's going to be very, very simple thanks to the dashboard. I'm going to ask you to check, do you have a server entry point? Do you have a web entry point? And also a web secure entry point? Do you have these three minimum? Also, can you actually close this prompt? So close the whole git bash if you want, refresh this, and does it still work? So that's the second thing. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's gonna be it for today. Big episode. I hope this one didn't scare you too much. We're pretty much, that was the most complex part. So we're pretty much done with the complexity. Almost. We got some Docker Compose to do, but that's gonna be fun. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. If you need any help, Discord is always there for you. So, or you can also tune in on the Twitch stream. I'd love to see you guys there. It's really fun when we stream on Saturday, either on YouTube or Twitch. Mostly on Twitch if you want to catch me during the week. But yeah, it's always fun. If you want to tune in, come say hello. And you can ask questions. So with that said, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.